The press briefing had just concluded when it happened. Karoline Leavitt, poised and composed, had been wrapping up, her responses crisp, articulate, and unwavering. Everything seemed routine, almost subdued, until a voice sliced through the air like a blade. "Miss Leavitt," a reporter called out, their tone laced with condescension. "At just 27 years old, don't you think you're a little too inexperienced for a role of this magnitude? With all due respect, wouldn't this position be better suited for someone with more years under their belt, someone the American people can truly rely on?" The question hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned toward the reporter, a young man clutching a thick notepad, his smirk growing as he tapped his pen against the desk, clearly savoring the moment. He was waiting for Karoline's response. For a fleeting second, her calm exterior flickered, just enough for those nearby to notice. But she quickly regained her composure, pressing her lips into a measured, polite smile. She didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched, thick with tension, almost suffocating. Then, from near the podium, a familiar voice cut through the stillness. "Is that what we're doing now?" Donald Trump's voice rang out, firm yet edged with amusement. He leaned into the microphone, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dry humor. "We're questioning people just because they're young, really? That's where we're at?" The reporter shifted in his seat but held his ground. "Well, Mr. President, it's a fair question. Experience matters. Surely, you'd agree that someone with more years in politics might be better suited." Trump held up a hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Stop right there. First of all, it's not a fair question. It's a lazy one. And I've heard enough lazy questions in my time to recognize them on the spot." A ripple of laughter broke the tension in the room. Trump continued, his voice sharpening. "Second, let's not pretend you actually care about experience. You're not worried about experience. You're worried about her being someone you can't predict, someone you can't control." The reporter blinked, momentarily stunned by the directness of the response. But Trump wasn't finished. "You know what's funny?" he said, gesturing toward the reporter. "You never ask the people who've been in Washington for 20, 30, even 40 years, decades, collecting dust and doing absolutely nothing for the American people about their experience, do you? You never question whether their fancy suits and endless committee meetings have actually qualified them for anything. No, you're perfectly fine with them staying in their cushy positions forever, talking and talking while never getting a thing done." The mood in the room shifted. Some reporters exchanged glances, a few even nodded. Trump was a polarizing figure, no doubt, but there was an undeniable truth in his words. And here's the irony. Trump continued, leaning in slightly, locking eyes with the reporter. "People like Karoline Leavitt, they're exactly what this country needs. Young? Sure. Big deal. But more importantly, she's sharp. She's capable. And that scares you, doesn't it?" His words hung heavy in the air. The reporter, suddenly at a loss for words, said nothing. And in that moment, it was clear, Karoline Leavitt wasn't the one being scrutinized. It was the system itself. Karoline sat still, her expression measured, but there was no mistaking the fire in her eyes. She had faced skepticism before, endured the condescending nods, the dismissive remarks disguised as concern, but this was different. It wasn't just a defense of her ability, it was a declaration. Trump leaned forward, gripping the podium with both hands. His gaze never wavered. "Let me ask you something," he said, voice steady but forceful. "If experience is the end-all, be-all, then why is Washington such a mess? Why is our economy struggling under the weight of reckless policies? Why do hard-working Americans feel abandoned by the very people who claim to represent them?" He let the questions hang, his words slicing through the room with the weight of undeniable truth. The reporter, now visibly unsettled, fumbled with their notepad. "Well, Mr. President, governance is complex. It requires—" "Oh, please," Trump interrupted with a dismissive wave. "Spare me the lecture. Governance requires action, courage, and fresh ideas. Not a bunch of career politicians who spend decades making empty promises. And that's exactly why Karoline is here. She's not weighed down by the baggage of political favors or special interests. She's here to fight for the American people, not to keep the swamp comfortable." He gestured toward Karoline, who remained composed but alert. "You sit there and question her, but you never question the failures of the so-called experienced politicians who have run this country into the ground. Where was your outrage when they made backroom deals that sold out American workers? Where was your concern when they racked up trillions in debt, leaving future generations to clean up the mess?" The reporter swallowed hard, their earlier confidence now visibly shaken. Trump wasn't done. "You don't get to pick and choose when experience matters. When it benefits the establishment, you stay quiet. But when someone like Karoline comes along, someone who actually works, actually listens, actually delivers, you move the goalposts. You frame her age as a weakness because you can't argue against her results. A murmur spread through the room. More reporters exchanged glances. Some nodded. Others scribbled notes furiously, sensing the shift in momentum. And let me tell you something else, Trump added, his voice lowering just slightly, his tone more deliberate now. This country wasn't built by people who waited their turn. It wasn't built by bureaucrats who played it safe. It was built by visionaries, by fighters, by people who weren't afraid to challenge the system. That's what Karoline is doing. He straightened, glancing around the room before landing his gaze back on the reporter. So, the real question isn't whether she's too young. The real question is, are you too afraid to see what she can do? The silence was deafening. The reporter, who had started this exchange with smug certainty, now sat rigid, unsure of what to say. Karoline finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. I appreciate the concern, she said, looking directly at the reporter. But I'll let my work speak for itself. A beat passed. Then another. And then, slowly, the room broke into applause. Not forced, not performative, but genuine. Even some of those who had been skeptical couldn't deny the truth in what had just been said. Trump smiled, leaning into the microphone one last time. Now, he said, smirking. Anyone got a real question? Laughter rippled through the room, and just like that, the moment was sealed. Karoline wasn't just holding her ground, she was making history. The moment lingered, the energy in the room electric. Reporters who had been skeptical, even dismissive at the start, now found themselves reevaluating what they had just witnessed. The usual script had been torn apart, replaced by something raw, something real. Karoline wasn't just another young politician trying to prove herself. She was standing firm, unapologetic, and impossible to ignore. She turned her attention back to Trump, his expression still carrying that familiar blend of amusement and confidence. Well, she said, tilting her head slightly. I guess I should be ready for more questions like that. Trump chuckled. Oh, you'll get plenty, and worse. But here's the thing, when they come at you like that, it's because they know you're a threat. If they didn't take you seriously, they wouldn't bother. He paused, letting the thought sink in. So take it as a compliment. Karoline nodded, absorbing his words. It was a lesson she had been learning in real time. Respect wasn't given, it was earned. And today, she had earned it in front of the entire room. A voice called out from the back. Miss Leavitt, would you say this moment proves your ability to handle pressure at the national level? Karoline turned smoothly, the confidence in her stance unmistakable. I'd say my ability to handle pressure was never in question, she replied evenly. But if anyone needed proof, I think they just got it. Laughter and murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. The tide had shifted. And as she stood there, unwavering, it was clear, Karoline Leavitt wasn't just stepping into the fire. She was walking straight through it, unscathed. In the face of doubt, scrutiny, and condescension, Karoline Leavitt did not falter. She stood her ground. Her story is a testament to an undeniable truth. Leadership is not measured by age but by conviction, resilience, and the courage to challenge the status quo. Donald Trump's defense of Karoline was more than just a rebuttal to a skeptical reporter. It was a larger statement about the power of fresh voices in a system often resistant to change. Experience, while valuable, does not always guarantee wisdom or effectiveness. True leadership comes from those who dare to step forward, defy expectations, and push for real results. For those who have spent decades watching politics unfold, this moment serves as a reminder. The world does not move forward by waiting for permission. It moves forward when individuals, young and old alike, take action despite opposition. No matter our age or background, we all have a role to play in shaping the future. The lesson here is clear. When faced with resistance, do not shrink. Stand firm, speak boldly, and remember, change has never come from those who simply waited their turn.